Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with another 10 cards 1 kit video, but the kit that I'm featuring today is the Love from Lizi kit, which is a new to me kit, and it is jam-packed with all kinds of interesting things. There's a lot of embellishments, which makes it really easy to work with. As I'm flipping through the kit, though, you might notice that I'm wiping things down with a Swiffer, and that's just because there is glitter in some parts of the kit, and when I make cards for hospitalized kids and some other organizations, they can't have glitter, so I wanted to make sure that I removed some of the glitter as I went. But I do think that if you like shaker cards, you're going to really love this kit because of the different glitter and sequins, and there's just so much sparkle going on. So to me, it's a really pretty girly kind of feminine kit. As I mentioned, I personally am probably going to stay away from the sparkle, at least for these 10 cards. But I think that I'll make like a second round of cards with some of the other goodies from the kit. There is 6x6 pattern paper. There was Nuvo drops. There were gems, glitter, chameleon marker, which are those sort of color changing markers. There is some specialty cardstock, a gold foil, and a gray metallic, a darker gray metallic, and then a gold glitter. There are these pink sticker strips. They're really thin, and I'm going to use them a lot throughout the cards. There's a little sticker sheet. There is some fancy vellum with this like gold foiling detail all over, which is kind of nice because if you don't have foiling materials, you get just a touch of it. And then there are 5 pieces of cardstock. The size is a little bit different than the traditional 8.5 by 11 that we get here in the US because this is a kit from the UK. So I'm going to use those pieces of cardstock as design elements and then just use regular 110-pound Recollections cardstock for my card bases, so they can be the traditional A2 size. I was really drawn to the different vellum pieces. I always like the look of vellum, but there are certain things that can make it a bit tricky to work with, and I'll mention some of those in some little workarounds. One thing that can be tricky is stamping on vellum. A lot of dye inks are supposed to sink into the paper, but vellum is slick and so they don't dry well on it. And one of the easiest things you can do is stamp with StazOn ink because it is meant for non-porous surfaces. However, it's not my favorite on vellum just because it doesn't come off as like a really dark black. And instead I decided to go with stamping with VersaFine ink, which is my favorite black ink for sentiments, and then clear embossing over it because I felt like that would give it a little bit more weight, and the sort of glossiness of the clear embossing over the black would pair up well with some of the elements in the kit anyway. So I personally tend to prefer the heat embossing. However, vellum can warp with heat embossing, so there's again some ways to try to get around that. But yeah, vellum can be a bit of a tricky material. So here I'm just stamping the hello on a couple of the pieces of vellum. They are the vellum pieces had like sort of cut apart shapes, sort of like those Project Life journaling card sizes. And I thought, well, those will make great card elements, so I stamped the hello from the stamp set as well as some of the leaves. I think that the stamp set really pairs well with a lot of the different pattern papers and things that are going on in the kit. I think that Lizi and her team, or whoever designs these kits, does a really nice job. Once I have all of the sentiments stamped on a couple different pieces of vellum, I am going to melt the embossing powder. I'm choosing to do this a few pieces of vellum at a time just because once the heat gun is hot, I can go through and do a bunch of them. It's going to heat up really fast, and the embossing powder is going to melt up really fast. So you want to make sure your gun is hot. Take it to your vellum and heat it as quickly as possible, and as soon as it melts, take it away because it will start warping. So the less time the heat gun is at it, the better. And since you have to wait for it to heat up, may as well emboss a few things at once. With these pieces of vellum, I really like the way that vellum like pattern paper looks behind vellum because it really helps to tone it down and create an interesting look. So I wanted to pair some of these pieces of vellum with different pattern papers from the kit. And so, as is my usual style, I tend to just take whatever I'm working with and bring it to each sheet of pattern paper till one really strikes me. I didn't feel any of the pattern papers went as well with this large piece of vellum just because it had so much pattern going on itself that I decided to pair it with a piece of cardstock. And that's more my tendency with pieces of cardstock that are included in a kit, is to use them because they pair well with the pattern paper to add layers. I don't tend to use them as card bases just because I just use a lot of white card bases instead. Once I've picked out a few pattern papers that I think go well with the vellum pieces, I've put them off to the side and I'm going to start assembling. One of the other challenges of working with vellum is adhesive. You can see adhesive through the vellum very easily. And I don't like the look of seeing your adhesive through the vellum. So one way you can address it with this particular vellum from the kit is if you put the adhesive where there is the gold foiling, then you won't see the adhesive because that gold foiling part is solid. And that works well for some of the vellum pieces in this kit, but some of them don't have a lot of gold going on, and so then I wanted to try out something that I had picked up at my local scrapbook store. It is vellum adhesive, specifically made for vellum, and it's from Glue Arts. I looked very carefully at the directions. It's a little more expensive of an adhesive, but I thought, well, if it works for vellum though, it'll be worth it. And so here I'm going to give it a go, see how it works, and report back on the results. It tells you to pull the backing sheet off, press it onto your vellum, and then pull it up. And, if you apply some, if you place it down and apply some pressure, it is supposed to be completely clear. However, and honestly, I wasn't really surprised. I was hoping, after spending a couple bucks on this adhesive that it would work, but you can see it. You can't really see it in the video here, but, in real life, not in pictures, it's visible. So I decided a way around that would be for this second piece of large vellum, I would add this vellum adhesive behind the florals because it wasn't really, really noticeable, but it was noticeable. So I thought, well, if I kind of camouflage it behind the colorful pieces of vellum rather than the like clear or white pieces of the vellum, then maybe that will work better. And I found that in that instance, that was preferable. But another thing that I didn't like about this adhesive is it's not very strong. The vellum was peeling off my cardstock really easily. Like, it wasn't like if you shake it, it would just fall off, but if you sort of lifted it at all, the adhesive would just start peeling off. So to me, if it wasn't perfectly clear and wasn't very strong, I don't know, I just can't review it well. I wouldn't recommend it. There are some other vellum adhesives out there, and if you have a vellum adhesive that you've used in the past that you really like, please let me know, or other tips for gluing down vellum. But my biggest thing is always just to put the glue behind other things, like other pieces of the vellum, like the designed area or a solid area, your stamping, etc., etc. I know that you can also use other methods of adhering it down, like stapling it. And that's an option too. So I'm moving on past the vellum cards to this other design idea that I had of covering part of a pink pattern paper with these, it's like a gold foil paper, but I wanted to cut a bunch of the bicycles out from it. I really liked the bicycle die, and I wanted to use it multiple times, and I thought, well, this metallic gold paper was perfect for them. And so I die cut a whole bunch of metallic bicycles, you can see there in the top left, and I didn't want to cover the whole sheet in it. I thought that might be a little bit too much, so I'm going to leave some of it blank and to sort of distinguish from the area where they are kind of creating a pattern in the area where they're not, I put down a strip of the gold metallic paper. And the first time I tried that, I put it a little bit too low for where I wanted my sentiment, and I tried to remove it quickly because I was using multimedia matte, and sometimes you have a little bit of flex with it, but it didn't really work. So I moved on to a second piece of pattern paper and put that first piece that got kind of messed up off to the side, knowing that I would come up with a purpose for it later. I'm not going to throw that piece away just because there's a little bit of fraying on it. I'm going to try to put the bicycles in a way that covers most of the area on top of the card. This was a little bit tricky to do. My sort of go-to thing would be to glue things down and then like trim off the edges. However, because I have that gold strip there, I couldn't do it that way. And I sort of had to eyeball it, make a cut as straight as can be. I was sometimes using the paper trimmer to make the cut a little bit more straight. And I also decided that I didn't really want to have all of the bicycles facing each and every, like sometimes when I do a pattern, I make the objects face in all different directions. But with the bicycles, I played around with that idea and I didn't really like it. I liked the idea of all of the bicycles facing, you know, with the seat on the top and the wheels on the bottom the traditional way, and all sort of leftwards rather than some of them pointing down, for instance. So I hope that makes sense. But basically, I started by gluing on some of the largest bicycles, filling up the largest area. Then I had just a little bit of room on the left and the right, and I wanted to see if I could fill that space without cutting up complete bicycles so that I would have more of those embellishments to use later, because you do only get one piece of this gold metallic paper, which is super awesome. And you know, you can only use so much gold metallic anyway, but I really liked it and I wanted to make sure that I could use it on as many cards. And so I started taking the little wheel pieces, trimming them up and using that to cover the edges, because it'll just look like there's a bicycle kind of, you know, off to, like as if it, you know, almost went completely off the paper, and I was able to fill a lot of space that way. I guess if you drew out the full bicycle, maybe that wouldn't really make sense, but I think that it kind of worked for here, and I was happy with it in the end. And I liked that I was able to, you know, save more of those gold metallic bicycles. For most of my cards, I am going to just be using that hello sentiment. Like I said, I do donate most of my cards. I always list in the video description my card drive resources page where you can find out more about donating cards, but they need a lot of general sentiments. So there was with and love as sentiments here, so you could say hello love or with love, and I don't think that those would necessarily be inappropriate for these type of cards, but I just thought, well, hello is perfect, so I'm just going to keep rolling with it for these 10 cards. But there is so much more to the kit. I could easily probably make like 30 or 40 other cards. Back to the card that I'm working on now. I'm working directly on a card base. I'm trying for something a little bit more clean and simple after I used a lot of pattern on the last few. And I also really wanted to play around with these line stickers and the banner stickers. There's a lot of fun stickers in this kit. And I focused on using them because they didn't have any glitter and or like any small parts, which can be a little bit tricky. So I'm cutting up, I'm laying down the banner and then the 3 lines. I'm using the grid mat that's underneath, like that is my work surface, to help me make things a little bit more straight. And then I'm turning it over, cutting that off. I'm stamping the hello and gluing one of the metallic bicycles. I think that the metallic bicycle really works well here because it, you know, it really just grabs your attention because it's so shiny compared to everything else, and there's so much white space that your eye gets immediately drawn to it. As I did before, I'm using the multimedia matte from Ranger to glue all of these down. The card kit did come with a glue stick, and I didn't try it just because I had adhesive that I knew would work, but I think that it could do a lot of similar stuff. One of the other neat embellishments that this card kit came with, and like I said, I appreciated that there was a lot of embellishment in this card kit, because I feel like sometimes card kits don't include as much of that. They include a lot of stamps and dies, which are great too, but little touches can be fun, especially when they're color coordinated like this. So it includes this twine. there's pink, yellow, and black twine to pair up with the colors of the kit. And so I decided to give it a go, and I used all of the yellow twine in one card just because I do have twine in my stash, so if I ever needed more yellow twine, I probably have some. But I thought it added a lot of texture here. So I wrapped all of the yellow twine around a piece of the yellow cardstock. Then I took that vellum, which came in just a small strip, and I glued that over it to create sort of like a pattern strip. Because that vellum has so much pattern to it, you don't really have to worry about the adhesive showing through it. So I just used my ATG gun, which is my sort of main go-to adhesive that I use to adhere down most things and usually adhere down paper. And I'm again trying to build up these layers of stripes. This kind of like comes up over and over again with this kit, and I think it's partly because of these stripe stickers, or I don't have a good word for it, but these, pink line stickers and the banners that came with the kit. They just sort of like that idea kind of got into my head, and so I've used it a few times, but I like the look of texture that adding the twine to it gives you. And I like that the vellum strip from this kit is so detailed. It has a gold foiling to it that might be a little bit hard to see on camera now, that even small bits of it really make a large impact. So once I had that down and I stamped the hello, I was like, this card looks a lot like the card I just did. I need to do something different. And so I decided to mask off that bottom portion there and mix this idea of the stripes with sort of the idea of that bicycle card where I created my own pattern with the dies. I'm going to create my own pattern paper with the stamps. The stamp set has a lot of pretty simple floral images in it, and they are of varying sizes, so I've just put 4 different images on blocks, 2 flowers, I guess 3 flowers, because there's a little grouping of 3 little shapes that like little starburst flowers, and then there's just a little group of circles. And the circles are definitely helpful when trying to build up your own pattern here, just because I could stamp just one of them and fill in a small space. I am generally trying to make sure that I'm not stamping, I guess, the rose right next to another rose, or the other flower that looks kind of like a daisy. I'm pretty sure it's not a daisy, but like, I don't know names of flowers, sorry. If you know what it is, please tell me. And I don't want them to be right next to each other either. I want them to be broken up by a rose or broken up by one of the other smaller images. And so my process is usually just to start around the sentiment or to start in one corner. I don't like to start at the edges. I prefer to base it around something else. So that way there's a lot of bits of the flowers that are hanging off the edge, and it makes it look more like an authentic pattern paper. Because I've wrapped the twine all the way around that cardstock, I'm going to attach it to my card base with foam tape instead of regular adhesive, just because that twine will give it a little bit of a bump, and the foam tape will prevent that bump. Next up, I returned to the sticker set. The sticker set had some cute things in it, but not all of them were perfect for the kinds of cards I was looking to create today, like with this session of card making. So I found that a lot of the sentiments weren't exactly what I wanted, but I really liked that group of 3 stickers that had the floral images in the center. And I thought that, things tend to look good in 3s. There is the pink, yellow, pink pattern of them, and so I could make them be a pretty big focal point on a card. So that's what I'm doing here. They really pop off this piece of black pattern paper. I picked one of the other pattern papers that I really liked from the card kit because I knew that it was pretty neutral and would go well, even though I was going to add a lot of extra embellishment to it. Because it was a small pattern, it would be able to handle all of the layers and all of the extra that was going on with the card. And the black really helps to ground it, as I mentioned before. I wanted to stamp the hello, but even though that pattern paper is relatively small, I did think that the hello would get lost if I just stamped it there, and I thought, well, I should probably put the sentiment on another piece of pattern paper that was either another piece of pattern paper or a piece of cardstock that was more solid. Since there was a scrap of pink sitting on my desk, that's what I went with. I tend to do that, especially when working with a card kit. Go to my scraps first, see if I can make one of them work before I cut into something new. And it's going to be easy to do that just because everything coordinates with each other and you don't always have to cut up a fresh sheet. So I just kind of peeled up the black cardstock, laid this pink strip underneath it, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment. As I mentioned before, I'm using VersaFine black ink for all the sentiment stamping. This sentiment is a little bit thicker, and sometimes dye inks can have a little bit of trouble with thicker stamps in terms of stamping perfectly the first time. So I'm going to lean towards the VersaFine. Next up, I decided to make a shaker. I don't know that I'll be able to send the shaker just because it has the small bits of the sequins, so I might have to think of a different purpose or send the shaker to an organization that gives cards to adults, so it won't be so much of an issue. But I really wanted to use the bicycle die as a shaker opening. So I cut it out of this gray chunk of cardstock. I believe the piece of cardstock is 3 by 4 1/4. So it's 1 inch smaller than the card base that's going to be up there in the top left corner. That's what I'm going to put it on. And in order to get all the little bits that go in the center of the bicycle that make it look like a bicycle, I have to lay the bicycle down over the plastic piece of the shaker. So I glued a piece of plastic behind the gray cardstock, which is going to what holds the shaker bits in. I laid down the bicycle without gluing it. There's no adhesive. It's just sitting there to show me where to glue all these little pieces. And I am going to, for the most part, use my ATG, but some of these really small pieces I couldn't, so I switched over to my multimedia matte. It's not my go-to for gluing to acetate just because a lot of times it will smush out the sides, and even though multimedia matte dries clear and matte, you can notice it a little bit more on acetate versus on pattern paper. On pattern paper, if a little bit smushes out the side, it's not really noticeable. It is a little bit noticeable with acetate, and so my recommendation is after you know it's really dry, you can go in with an adhesive eraser or your finger and just sort of rub off the little bits. So once the plastic is glued on the back and all the little pieces are filled in on the front, I am ready to just make the shaker part. For a while, I really kind of struggled with shakers, and I think that's because I wanted to be able to mail them. And so when you mail a card, usually you can only get about 1 layer of foam tape before you have to either pay extra postage or like it becomes a package, and I don't know. So it can be a little bit tricky with the post office sometimes, and I don't always want to have to go to the post office to mail a card. But anyway, like I said, I'll probably donate this in like a box of cards, or if you know people who you're going to hand cards to, then this works fine. But basically what I'm doing is I'm doubling up the foam tape, and it makes it really thick, and again, makes it a little more challenging to mail. Extra postage helps a lot, but also things kind of can get smushed in the mail when they have a lot of foam tape. But anyway, I'm doubling up the foam tape, and I'm just going to create a box or rectangle around the bicycle. I'm not going to try to make it go perfectly around the bicycle. I know that sometimes when you're trying to create like a circle shaker card, making it go right around the circle can be kind of nice, but since it's on a rectangle piece, I'm going to make it easy for myself and just make the shaker a rectangle. What's really important to do is to make sure that it's completely sealed, because the sequin mix has some little seed beads in it, and so if you don't seal it all the way, those things can fall out and become more of a problem later. I wanted to see a solid color through the bike because when I placed it over the pattern paper, I didn't really like how that looked, and I didn't think you'd see the sequins. So I tried out some other colors, but ultimately settled with just making it gray. And that way I thought that the sequins would show through the best. Black would probably work well as an option as well. I'm going to sprinkle some of the sequin mix. I don't want it to be too much because if it gets too thick, sometimes it can get stuck and not move around as much in the shaker. But it's kind of up to you and what you like with your shaker cards. And so I'll create like a little clump of different sequins here in the center. There's like some really large pink sequins, and I took a few of those out just to make sure the colors were a little bit more mixed and I didn't have too much pink. And then I'm going to take that shaker piece and place it on top. I removed the adhesive backing on the foam tape, of course. So that was my one shaker card, because I thought, well, for sure you need to make a shaker card with this kit. This kit said make a shaker with me, at least in my opinion. And then I'm oddly back to the stripe thing, where because there was so much of that banner, there's 2 banners and they're like 12 inches long, so when you're making cards, you can make a couple cards out of the banner. And I was playing around with it, trying to think, like, what am I going to do this time that maybe will look a little bit different. We'll see what you guys think, but they do wind up kind of the same. And I wanted to use both of the banners together so that instead of looking like a banner, it looks more like a pattern on the bottom. And I was able to achieve that by doing the same thing that you see on the sticker sheet. So you might not even realize when you first look at the sticker sheet that they are 2 separate banners, instead thinking maybe it's, it's triangle pattern. And so I basically recreated that. And then at first I thought that was going to be the bottom of my card, but I thought, well, I still have a little bit more of this banner, and maybe I should just kind of use it all up on this card, so I stopped making these banner cards. And I'm using more of these pink stripe stickers, since there's a lot of them included in the kit. Even though there's just one sheet, you can make a lot of projects with them, because I'm going to estimate there's probably like 25 of or more probably, of the little strips. So underneath the triangle pattern, I put down 2 strips of those pink stickers, and then I added the second banner. And once I had done that, again, I'm using the grid pattern behind my card panel, my grid pattern on my work surface, to make these a little bit more straight. And I'm making sure that I center the banner such that you're not like on the left side, you wouldn't want to be having a whole banner, and on the right half a banner. Like, I want a little piece on each side sticking out. I hope that, or being cut off. I hope that makes sense. But, like on the black banner, there's just a little bit of banner left on the left side and a little bit of banner left on the right side, rather than one ending in a complete banner. So I'm centering it rather than, making it perfectly aligned to the left or right. Once I had that, and I rounded the corners, I thought it's kind of boring because it's just stickers at this point. I thought, well, maybe if I added a little bit of texture with the twine, that would make it a bit more interesting. And this time, twine can be a little bit tricky to glue down, so instead of bothering with that, I just wrapped it around the card and taped the edges with some Scotch tape. In this case, I'm not going to worry about popping it up with foam tape for the completed card, just because there's only one small strip of the twine, and this twine is a little bit thinner. As I mentioned earlier, I had this pink piece of paper that I had kind of messed up a little bit down there at the bottom. You might notice that there's like a little bit of area that is messed up with glue, and I didn't want to just throw it out. So as I moved on with creating cards, I thought, well, I really haven't used the stamp set enough. What if I cut a whole bunch of pink flowers from that sheet of pattern paper? And so that's what I did. I stamped a whole bunch with VersaFine ink. Then I scanned it with my brother's Scan and Cut, and that's my brother's Scan and Cut mat you just saw there. And I'm able to remove them and have a whole bunch cut at one time. Even if there were coordinating dies, if you wanted to, I think there's like 12 of those there, like if you had to run it through your machine each time to cut out those flowers, it get kind of annoying. So I personally really love my brother's Scan and Cut for that reason, to be able to cut out a whole bunch of things at once, to not have to buy coordinating dies for every set. I know there's some fun techniques you can do with the coordinating dies that you can't do with the Scan and Cut, but for the most part, I really enjoy it. So I glued them down in sort of a ring, and I glued them onto the black paper because, again, I think that it will really pop, kind of like those stickers did off it. I really wanted to use this "You Are Lovely" sticker, and I'm kind of like, at this point, because this is my last card, incorporating the few things here and there that I liked about the kit but hadn't used yet, like that sticker, like using the stamps colored in because I haven't colored them yet. And I tried to use the gold bicycle, but I didn't really like the way that worked, so I tried the bicycle in some different colors. I liked the yellow to coordinate with the tag, however, it got a little bit lost, and so I decided to double it up by adding a gray, a little bit off center from it to, you know, just give it a little bit more pop. Then I'm going to take this piece of black paper and layer it on some yellow, again, just to pull in that yellow color that is in different parts of the card. And since I knew I only wanted to have a small border of the yellow, I cut a die out of the center of it. I used the stitched journaling card or something from Fawn, just because I thought, well, you're not going to see that part, so cut a hole in it, and then I can use that stitched, panel for another card in the future. And that is the last card from the kit. I'm going to go through and flip through the cards, but I also noticed I had 2 more roses that I had cut, so I thought, well, as I flip through the cards and kind of see what I had done, I would see if there's a card here or there that would benefit from having a little rose added to it, and just pop that on to finish up those cards just by gluing it down with my ATG gun. And so I'm like trying it on a few different cards, see what I like. But you can see the variety of different cards that I created. You can probably tell what was some of my favorite embellishments and pieces from the kit. There are a bunch of things in the kit that I haven't even used yet because, like I said, this kit is jam-packed. Like, you could probably make 40 cards or more with this kit if you added some cardstock, just because there's so much going on. And anyway, that is it for this tutorial. This is my 10 cards. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, including a lot of kit videos and 6x6 paper pad tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a Love from Lizi kit, and I will link you to the Love from Lizi shop. That particular kit is sold out, but you can check again next month if you appreciate the value of the kits. Have an awesome day. Thank you. Bye.